shadow.
Subscribe if you wish to remain inside the circle where the curtain falls softly and the stage breathes. Tonight, we promise a quiet trespass, the secret history of a book that never lived and yet refuses to die. The Necronomicon, a rumor bound in calfskin, a mask that fits every face, a key and a gate. You've heard its name in fog-dense whispers between the lamp's dull halo and the window's black pane. You've seen the sigil of a book that shouldn't exist, and in that seeing, it has existed a little more. The cost is small at first, a prickle on the neck, the taste of iron and vellum, the sense that the stage's audience is not only us, but something beyond the lights, watching. We frame one object, one force, the Necronomicon, as principle, not merely a prop in Lovecraft's theater, but a mechanism, an engine by which fiction trespasses into the waking world. Where did it come from? Why does it travel like fog along docks, across translations between fandoms and cults? How can a book that never was leave footprints on library floors you can count, smell, and dust? In Lovecraft's Mythos, the Necronomicon is the book of dead names, the mad Arab's testament, Abdul al-Hazred, poet of deserts and ruined cities. But notice the early inversion. Before there was a manuscript, there was a murmur. Before ink, breath. Lovecraft seeded its citations into stories like grit into a pearl, a reference here, a librarian's warning there, a wormed stack where a binding should be but isn't. He made you consent to the premise by reusing the prop until repetition itself felt like evidence, a rumor with a bibliography. The genius lay not in creating a book, but in creating the absence of a book. Empty shelves speak louder than filled ones when the emptiness has shape, weight, expectation. Lovecraft understood that the most powerful texts are those that exist in the spaces between words, in the silence after the librarian's warning, in the gap where your finger traces along spines and finds nothing where something should be. He made you complicit in the creation by making you search for what was never there to find. Consider how the mechanism operates. In The Hound of 1922, the name drops like a stone into still water. No explanation, no context, just the cold certainty of citation. By The Dunwich Horror, the book has gained weight, substance, a history of dangerous readers and terrible consequences. The Whateleys consult it like a farmer's almanac, but for crops that shouldn't grow in soil that shouldn't exist. Each mention adds another layer of fictional sediment until the accumulated weight begins to feel like archaeological evidence. The sensory anchors ground the impossible in the mundane. You smell the must of old paper, feel the leather binding worn smooth by desperate fingers, hear the whisper of pages turning in empty reading rooms. These concrete details serve as infection vectors, allowing the abstract concept to colonize your sensory memory. The book becomes something you can almost remember handling, almost recall reading, almost taste on your tongue like copper pennies and old parchment. Listen to the paper flutter, smell the chalk dust, see the water-beaded window, the distant stars snagged on bare tree branches. We will trace origins, then lineages, then mechanics. We will examine cases like pale specimens under green lamps, Dunwich ledgers, Wormius ashes, Dee's Latin. We will widen the stage to other black books and then cross-contaminate with digital grimoires. Then we will leave the theater and walk into town. The communities that sustain impossible books through collective belief. But Lovecraft's masterstroke was the bibliography itself. He didn't just create a book. he created a scholarly apparatus around the book. References to Olaus Wormius, the medieval translator who rendered the Arabic into Latin, mentions of John Dee's suppressed English version, citations of library holdings at Miskatonic University, Harvard's Widener Library, the British Museum. The fictional became embedded in the factual until the seam between them blurred beyond detection. This is where the stage metaphor reveals its deeper truth. We are not simply audience to Lovecraft's performance. We are unwitting actors in an ongoing play that began in 1922 and continues still. Every time someone searches for the Necronomicon, every time curiosity overcomes skepticism, the performance continues. The book exists in the searching for it, grows stronger through the very attempts to verify its non-existence. You feel it now, don't you? The slight shift in the air, the sense that something has changed in the quality of your attention. This is how the contagion spreads, not through belief, but through engagement, not through acceptance, but through curiosity. The book doesn't need you to believe in it. It only needs you to think about it, to wonder about it, to let it occupy space in your consciousness where it can slowly reshape your understanding of what constitutes reality. You will be implicated. That is part of the pact. Because the Necronomicon, if it exists anywhere, exists precisely where attention gathers and refuses to disperse. The idea acts on you. The audience becomes the actor. The mask wears your face back at you. The stakes. Knowledge leaves fingerprints. The book reads the reader. And you will know you are reading when the curtain stops being cloth and becomes a veil, and the veil becomes a void. This opening chapter establishes the central paradox of the Necronomicon as both fictional creation and cultural reality. It introduces the concept of performative reality, maintained through collective attention rather than historical authenticity. The chapter implements the meta-story lexicon, stage, audience, curtain, while establishing sensory anchors, lamps, dust, fog, stars. It positions the book as a rumor with a bibliography, seeded through repeated citations until repetition became evidence. The self-implication begins subtly, suggesting readers participate in the phenomenon by engaging with it. The chapter ends with the promise to explore origin, lineage, mechanics, and cases, while warning that knowledge has a cost, and the idea acts upon its seekers. Origin is not the first light. It is the first shadow. Lovecraft built the Necronomicon by casting a longer, darker shadow over a stage already cluttered with props, witch trial pamphlets, travelers' tales, and real grimoires that smelled of tallow and mildew. He knew the power of a citation, and he used it like a mask that looked like truth. The al-asif, the night sound, the buzzing of demons emerged from Abdul al-Hazred's desert wanderings in Lovecraft's careful construction. But this genesis reveals the first principle of impossible books. They require genealogies that feel more authentic than authenticity itself. Al-Hazred, the mad poet of Sana'a, becomes more credible through his madness, more trustworthy through his unreliability. His journey through the empty quarter, his encounters with ruins older than memory, his final consumption by an invisible monster in Damascus. These details don't just describe a character, they create a transmission vector for cosmic knowledge. Consider the psychology of this construction. Madness becomes credential rather than disqualification. The mad Arab's fractured consciousness makes him permeable to truths that would shatter rational minds. His very derangement a testament to terrible encounters. You can almost feel the desert wind, taste the grit of forgotten sand as you imagine him scrawling blasphemies by dying flamelight, shadows writhing like the entities he desperately tried to name. His unreliability becomes reliability of a different order. The reliability of someone who has seen too much and speaks only in fragments, riddles, half-coherent warnings. In The Hound, the name appears with the cold weight of a paper slab. The Nameless City drops Alhazred's name like a stone into still water, creating ripples that would spread across decades. The Dunwich Horror makes the book practically a character, passed between Whately's like a ledger of favors owed to entities beyond human comprehension. Each appearance builds what scholars call mythic density, the accumulation of detail and cross-reference that makes fictional constructs feel historically grounded. These early mentions are more than literary devices. They are incantations, each repetition weaving the book further into the mythos fabric. The historian's trick is simpler and stranger. Lovecraft created additions. He mentions Olaus Wormius, a medieval translator whose name carries the dusty scent of ancient libraries. He invokes John Dee, Elizabeth Magus, and rumors of an English version burned, suppressed, repentant. He mentions library catalogs, Miskatonic's special collections, the British Museum's barred shelf, so you can anchor fiction to the smell of stacked paper and green reading lamps. This editorial archaeology provides what bibliographers call provenance, the chain of ownership establishing textual legitimacy. But more importantly, it creates multiple entry points for reader engagement, each fictional edition serving as a different mask, fitting different faces, appealing to different scholarly and mystical appetites. There are ancestors, the grimoires of Europe, the Picatrix, the Lesser Key of Solomon, the clavicula, were stage props for ritual, but also performative scripts. Their diagrams are sigils made to act upon the reader by changing what they expect of the world. These operated through performative efficacy. They worked not by describing pre-existing magical laws, but by creating conditions under which magical thinking could flourish. Lovecraft studies that effect, then abstracts it. The Necronomicon isn't an operations manual. It is a premise that acts through mention. Where traditional grimoires required active practice, circles drawn, candles lit, incantations spoken, his book works through passive exposure. Simply reading about it, encountering its name, imagining its contents, creates the necessary psychological conditions. The waterline rises. You can hear it in the brackish slosh by Arkham's Bridge, in Innsmouth's nets. The past is wet, as though text dragged itself out of a drowned library and left a trail. This aquatic imagery runs through Lovecraft's work like an underground river, connecting deep ocean to flooded basements to submarine cities. Water becomes the medium through which impossible knowledge travels, seeping through foundations, rising with tides, carrying whispers from depths where human reason cannot follow. The book's knowledge is tidal, rising and falling with cosmic cycles that dwarf human chronology. The Necronomicon matters because it makes readers complicit in fabrication by believing you bind the mask to a face. This complicity operates on multiple levels. Readers accepting the book's fictional existence become co-conspirators in literary hoax, but those engaging seriously with its implications become participants in more profound consciousness transformation. The book colonizes attention through the least dramatic means. Footnote. Aside. Accession number half remembered. Authority isn't asserted, but accumulated like sediment, buried in layers of procedural detail. Explores how Lovecraft constructed the Necronomicon's fictional history through strategic citations and pseudo-scholarly apparatus. It reveals how Abdul al-Hazred's madness makes him more credible as a source of forbidden knowledge, and how Lovecraft seeded references across multiple stories until repetition created the illusion of authenticity. The chapter connects the book to real grimoire traditions while showing how Lovecraft abstracted their performative power into something more conceptual. It introduces the idea that impossible books make readers complicit in their own fabrication, and that the book's power lies in acting through mention rather than direct revelation. The chapter ends by suggesting the book has achieved a form of reality through sustained cultural attention. If origin is shadow, transmission is infection. The Necronomicon operates by a mechanic we can call hyperstation, fiction that makes itself real by being believed, repeated, and performed. Knowledge as contagion, concept as parasite. The idea acts on you not through dramatic revelation, but through quiet colonization, settling into consciousness like spores finding fertile ground in the warm darkness of attention. Consider the book's fictional genealogy, Arabic original, by Abdul al-Hazred, Greek translation by Theodorus Philetus, Latin by Olaus Wormius, English by John D. Each translation is a mutation, an adaptation to new host environments. The Kitab al-Azif sounds authentic because it feels right. Lovecraft crafts a semi-credible Arabic root for a book that serves an English dream. This linguistic archaeology creates what we might call bibliographic epidemiology, routes through which impossible ideas travel between populations, adapting to local conditions while maintaining core infectivity. The mechanism operates through evolutionary pressure. The Arabic original appeals to Orientalist fascination with forbidden Eastern wisdom, carrying the exotic scent of desert winds and crumbling ziggurats. The Greek version suggests classical scholarship and ancient mysteries, evoking marble libraries and philosophical dialogues conducted in shadows. Wormius' Latin translation provides medieval authenticity, the weight of church-sanctioned horror and monastery scriptoriums where monks copied blasphemies with trembling hands. Dee's English version brings the contagion home, making it accessible to modern readers, while maintaining scholarly distance through Elizabethan cadences and alchemical terminology. But transmission continues beyond fiction's carefully constructed boundaries. August Derleth repackages the mythos, formalizes the pantheon, stamps the book into letters and anthologies like a virus cultivated in laboratory conditions, isolating active components, purifying them, preparing them for mass distribution. Colin Wilson and other writers stir the pot, adding their own mutations, creating hybrid strains that appeal to different audiences. The mythos becomes collaborative fiction, each author contributing genetic material to an evolving organism that grows stronger through cross-contamination. Then the 1970s bring the first public hoax editions, paperbacks claiming to be the real Necronomicon. The Simon Necronomicon marries Sumerian names to Lovecraft's aura, creating what virologists call antigenic shift, major genetic recombination producing new strain with enhanced infectivity. George Hayes' version spins cryptological webs. Donald Tyson adds ritual elements, each fake edition serving as mask that trains the audience to accept a face. These aren't simply forgeries, but evolutionary experiments, testing which combinations of authentic-seeming scholarship and mystical promise produce optimal transmission rates. You encounter a citation in a story. You feel the grain of the cover that isn't there, the phantom weight of binding that exists only in textual space. You Google it. You find a 1977 paperback winking from a reseller's shelf, a scanned sigil glowing like cold tin under fluorescent light, a forum where strangers discuss its efficacy with the hushed reverence of initiates. The sign is small geometry of lines doing large work, tying your breath to a cohort of unseen readers, drawing a chalk circle on the stage where you now stand implicitly. Even if you never light a candle, your attention is a match. Even if you never chant a line, your curiosity becomes the first vowel of an incantation you didn't know you were speaking. The internet has accelerated this process exponentially. Digital texts exist as pure information, copied infinitely without cost, modified instantly without trace. The Necronomicon's online proliferation follows viral patterns. Original uploads copied and reposted. Users creating versions, claiming to restore corrupted portions that never existed. Appending faux Greek passages to satisfy hungers that feed themselves. Wiki projects grow like coral reefs, polyps of citation accreting over dead scaffolds, thousands of pages detailing histories of entities that never needed history until we granted them one. Contributors adopt scholars' tone and librarians' patience, sourcing page numbers that point to mirrors, building collaborative reality through sustained attention and ritualized editing. The book achieves what we might call statistical authenticity, becoming real through sheer volume of references rather than historical verification. Unlike traditional authenticity requiring institutional backing, digital authenticity operates through frequency, connectivity, engagement. The Necronomicon doesn't need Vatican approval or academic endorsement. It needs only sufficient numbers of people treating it as real, discussing it as real, engaging with it as real through the cumulative weight of collective attention. Mimetic transmission thrives on paradox pairs, key and gate, veil and void, mask and face. The book seduces because it promises access and threatens loss. Read and you are initiated. Read and you are damaged. The brain attends to that double bind like an itch beneath a bandage you promised not to disturb. Cognitive biases assist the spell. The illusory truth effect makes repetition feel like proof. The frequency illusion makes every new mention shine with significance. Confirmation bias collects the hits and forgets the misses. The result is a self-reinforcing cycle where engagement breeds more engagement, attention generates more attention. The book is not a text. It is a behavior. It is what human minds do when confronted with the lure of forbidden. Order, pattern seek, cross-reference, annotate, whisper. By the time you notice the fog rolling in through digital networks and late-night conversations, you are already breathing it. By the time you notice the water rising in basements of consciousness, your shoes are leaving prints on damp linoleum. The page you sought begins to seek you, and the idea that you held now steadies your hand and guides your eyes along lines you did not write but somehow recognize, as though you had been reading them all your life, waiting for the moment when the text would finally read you back. Reveals the Necronomicon's power as hyperstition, fiction that becomes real through collective belief and performance. It traces the book's transmission from Lovecraft's original citations through various fake editions and digital proliferation. The chapter shows how each translation and adaptation serves as a mutation, allowing the idea to spread to new audiences and contexts. It introduces the concept of mimetic contagion, where engaging with the book's concept makes readers complicit in its ongoing creation. The digital age has accelerated this process, allowing the book to achieve statistical authenticity through sheer volume of references and engagement, regardless of historical accuracy. In university basements and digital archives, a peculiar breed of scholar works with materials that exist in perpetual ontological uncertainty. Dr. Robert Turner at Reading, Dr. Daniel Harms studying textual history, real academics publishing papers on fictional grimoires. They occupy a strange position in the knowledge ecosystem, studying fiction as cultural phenomenon worthy of serious analysis. Their offices smell of old coffee and newer anxieties, green lamps casting pools of light over stacks of books that may or may not have ever existed, depending on how you define existence and whether you're willing to stake your tenure on the answer. The stage is quiet here. Chalk dust settling on windowsills, water stains creeping across ceiling tiles like maps of drowned coasts, the distant hum of servers breathing behind locked doors where digital archives pulse with the rhythm of collective attention. This scholarly apparatus, footnotes, bibliographies, peer reviews, provides impossible books with institutional framework that transforms curiosities into legitimate objects of study. When university presses publish books about the Necronomicon, when conferences include panels on Lovecraftian textuality, the impossible books achieve academic reality. They cross the threshold from popular culture ephemera to scholarly concern, from fan obsession to professional interest. Graduate students write dissertations, professors assign readings, librarians catalog holdings with the same professional care devoted to medieval manuscripts and rare first editions. The machinery of academic validation begins its slow, inexorable work, each citation a bell tolling, each peer review a solemn pronouncement, each published article a stone laid in the foundation of a structure built on air. Academic reality operates by different rules than popular reality. Scholars routinely study things that don't exist in simple senses: literary characters, mythological figures, cultural concepts. Hamlet doesn't need to have lived in Denmark for scholars to analyze his psychology. Zeus doesn't need to have hurled actual thunderbolts for classicists to examine his role in ancient Greek religion. The question becomes not whether something exists, but whether it has sufficient cultural presence to warrant analysis. The Necronomicon has achieved this threshold through sustained scholarly attention, crossing from curiosity to phenomenon to legitimate research subject. For the academic, the book is real not because it can be found in library stacks, but because it can be found in the library of human consciousness, influencing thought, inspiring art, shaping perception. These scholars understand their complicity, though they don't always admit it in faculty meetings. Their work doesn't simply document cultural impact, it contributes to that impact. Every paper published, every conference presentation delivered adds another layer of institutional reality. They cannot study it without changing it, cannot observe without participating in its existence. The observer effect operates not only in quantum physics, but in cultural studies. Attention alters the phenomenon under investigation. When professors lecture about impossible books, they make those books more possible. When graduate students research fictional grimoires, they make those grimoires more real. The line between observer and observed blurs, as it always does when dealing with entities of pure information. Some embrace this complicity explicitly. Chaos magicians argue that effectiveness matters more than historical authenticity. A fictional grimoire that inspires genuine spiritual work is more real than historical texts sitting unread on shelves, gathering dust and indifference. This reflects broader postmodern recognition that all cultural realities are constructed through collective agreement rather than objective fact. If enough people treat something as real, if it produces measurable effects in the world, then questions of original authenticity become academic in the most literal sense, interesting to scholars but irrelevant to practitioners. The scholars develop what we might call ontological flexibility, comfort with uncertainty about existence that allows productive work with ambiguous materials. It is a learned skill, a necessary adaptation to navigate the shifting sands of conceptual reality. They learn to hold multiple possibilities simultaneously. The book is fictional and culturally significant, imaginary and socially effective, non-existent, and academically legitimate. This cognitive flexibility becomes a professional skill, a trained tenderness toward ambiguity, a readiness to read as if the page were watching back. Under this discipline, impossible books don't collapse into lies or rise into dogma. They hover, workable, instructive, dangerous only in ways that thinking is dangerous. They become carriers of the textual contagion they study, their students and colleagues developing similar fascination with impossible books. The contagion spreads through academic networks like any intellectual fashion, but with peculiar characteristics. Unlike normal academic trends that rise and fall with theoretical seasons, the study of impossible books seems to create permanent converts. Scholars who begin researching fictional grimoires as stepping stones to more respectable projects find themselves unable to abandon the subject entirely. It colonizes their attention, occupies their thoughts during department meetings, influences their choice of conference papers and sabbatical projects. Graduate seminars become inadvertent initiation ceremonies. Students arrive expecting to analyze cultural phenomena with detached scholarly rigor, but find themselves drawn into participatory relationship with their subject matter. They begin as observers and become participants, researchers and believers, critics and collaborators. The transformation is subtle, mediated through academic discourse and scholarly methodology, but the result is the same. Another cohort of infected minds carrying the contagion into new institutional contexts. The university library becomes a vector for transmission, special collections acquiring hoax editions with the same reverence accorded to illuminated manuscripts. The academic machinery, designed to analyze and categorize reality, finds itself generating new forms of reality through the very process of analysis, and the curtain between study and performance grows thin as vellum, translucent as the veil between waking and dream. Examines how real scholars studying fictional texts like the Necronomicon participate in transforming them into legitimate objects of academic inquiry. It shows how scholarly attention provides institutional framework that gives impossible books a form of academic reality based on cultural significance rather than historical authenticity. The chapter reveals how scholars become complicit in the phenomenon they study, unable to observe without participating in the book's ongoing creation. It introduces concepts of ontological flexibility and shows how academic communities serve as vectors for textual contagion, spreading fascination with impossible books through scholarly networks. Beneath academic respectability, in shadowed corners of the internet and occult bookshops, thrives a different community. These practitioners treat impossible books not as objects of study, but as sources of power. They form the grimoire underground, networks of individuals who have moved beyond analyzing forbidden texts to attempting to use them. In basement apartments, where computer screens glow like digital altars, in suburban bedrooms, where sigils drawn on notebook paper rest beside dog-eared paperbacks, the air carries faint metallic scents of ozone and lingering sweetness of obscure incenses. Here, the stage is intimate. The audience is the breath, and the curtain is a sleep mask pressed softly against closed eyes before words begin their quiet work. Consider Marcus, a software engineer who has spent 15 years working with Lovecraftian magical systems. His apartment smells of sandalwood and static electricity, walls lined with books ranging from computer manuals to hoax Necronomicons. His desk cluttered with printouts of ritual procedures he's modified like code patches, debugged through repeated testing, optimized for personal hardware. He doesn't claim Cthulhu literally exists, but has developed elaborate practices based on Lovecraft's descriptions. He reports profound experiences of ego dissolution, like mist stripping from marsh at dawn, encounters with vast intelligences that arrive as pressure behind the eyes, insights into consciousness that he attributes to the Mythos. He keeps a bowl of salted water by his monitor, watches the surface for tremors as code compiles, and says he has learned to read his own mind the way sailors read sky. These practitioners represent fascinating evolution in impossible books' lives. They've moved beyond questions of existence to pragmatic questions of effectiveness. Their approach is experimental. If ritual practices based on fictional grimoires produce meaningful results, altered consciousness, expanded awareness, contact with non-human intelligence, then fictional status becomes irrelevant. The mask fits the face it creates, and the face learns to wear the mask with increasing comfort. They operate like beta testers of consciousness, willing to install untested software in their minds, to run experimental code on the delicate hardware of perception. This pragmatic attitude reflects changes in contemporary occultism. Modern magical practitioners increasingly draw from diverse sources without worrying about historical authenticity. They combine elements based on effectiveness rather than pedigree, mixing Tibetan meditation techniques with chaos magic principles, Norse runes with Lovecraftian entities. Lovecraft's mythology provides complete cosmological systems, entities, hierarchies, practices that are internally consistent and free from existing religious baggage. Unlike traditional grimoires weighted with centuries of sectarian conflict, Lovecraftian systems arrive clean, unencumbered by historical claims or institutional authority. They offer cosmic perspective without demanding theological submission, transformation without conversion. The grimoire underground has created elaborate ritual systems, night meditations called abyssal descents, breathwork in tidal patterns named for Dagon, body postures like broken constellations they call Yog-Sothic alignments, bibliomancy with scrambled passages, dream incubation beneath star charts. Some use headsets and binaural drones tuned to the soft, throbbing hum of ship engines, a false ocean cupped against the skull. Others practice blackout journaling, where entries are masked under layers of ink, revealed later by rubbing graphite, as though words arrive like fossils emerging from shale. They speak of cold, vast calm, report non-human textures of thought, no faces, only structures. Whether these experiences reflect genuine cosmic contact or imagination's transformative power is, from their perspective, irrelevant. What matters is that practices work. This instrumental approach reveals textual power's true nature. Traditional grimoires derive authority from historical authenticity claims, seals traced back to Solomon, angels named in Apocrypha, practices carried through initiatory chains. But Lovecraftian grimoires derive power from bypassing rational defenses entirely. The impossible book becomes a Trojan horse for forbidden knowledge. It slips past the sentinels of reason because it declares itself fiction, harmless diversion. When practitioners work with admittedly fictional texts, conscious barriers dissolve, allowing deeper psychological engagement with symbolic content. The rational mind, having classified material as fiction, relaxes its guard, permitting symbolic systems to operate directly on unconscious processes without triggering skeptical resistance. Online communities share PDFs of ritual procedures, discuss optimal timing for different invocations, debate psychological effects with methodical enthusiasm of hobbyists comparing equipment. Credibility accrues to those who report failures without embarrassment, who can hold the stage without performing certainty. There is mentorship without hierarchy, a chorus without conductor. Their modifications and innovations feed back into the larger mimetic system, influencing other practitioners, inspiring new variations, contributing to the book's continued evolution. The effect resembles what psychologists call imaginative immersion, capacity to engage fully with fictional scenarios while maintaining awareness of their constructed nature. But practitioners push this beyond entertainment into transformation, using fictional frameworks as scaffolding for genuine psychological change. They discover that consciousness doesn't distinguish between real and fictional symbols. When those symbols are engaged with sufficient depth and consistency, the psyche responds to archetypal patterns regardless of historical provenance. The grimoire underground represents an advanced stage of textual contagion, where readers become writers, consumers become creators, observers become participants in ongoing collaborative mythology. They don't simply read about impossible books, they write new chapters, develop new practices, discover new applications for fictional technologies. They become active agents in impossible books' ongoing development, their experiences adding new layers to accumulated cultural sediment that gives these texts their strange reality. The curtain between fiction and function dissolves, and practitioners find themselves performing on a stage where the audience has become the play, where the script writes itself through being enacted, where the impossible achieves reality through the simple expedient of being lived. Explores communities of practitioners who use fictional forbidden texts as sources of actual magical or spiritual practice. It shows how these individuals have moved beyond authenticity questions to focus on practical effectiveness, developing elaborate systems based on Lovecraft's fictional descriptions. The chapter demonstrates how fictional texts can bypass rational defenses more easily than traditional grimoires, and how practitioners create functional mythology that serves psychological and spiritual needs regardless of historical authenticity. It reveals how the grimoire underground represents advanced textual contagion, with practitioners becoming active agents in impossible books' ongoing evolution. In 1973, a black paperback with silver sigils appeared on bookstore shelves, claiming to be the first complete English translation of the Necronomicon. Within months, it became one of America's best-selling occult books. The publisher was real. The translator was L. Sprague de Camp. The book was an elaborate hoax, but a hoax with a difference. It was simultaneously fictional and functional, imaginary and effective. A real fake book. The cover gleamed under fluorescent bookstore lights like wet tar, sigils etched in silver foil that caught the eye and held it, promising secrets that felt ancient even as they emerged from modern printing presses. The scent of cheap glue and mass-market paper mingled with the promise of forbidden knowledge, creating what we might call the first commercially successful impossible book, a text that worked regardless of its provenance, pages that breathed with borrowed authority. This paradoxical status reveals something profound about impossible books in the modern world. They exist in spaces between truth and lie, authentic and inauthentic, where traditional verification categories break down and new reality forms emerge. The marketplace became more than distribution network. It became sanctuary, theater with cash registers, chapel smelling faintly of cardboard and dust. Success bred shadows and siblings. The initial triumph spawned dozens of imitators, each seeking to capitalize on the burgeoning hunger for forbidden lore. Donald Tyson's scholarly version with careful footnotes and ritual apparatus. The mysterious Simon edition that married Sumerian mythology to Lovecraftian dread. George Hayes' cryptological approach. Free's Mardukite edition, claiming Babylonian origins. Each claimed authenticity while acknowledging, implicitly or explicitly, the original's fictional status, a contradiction that should have collapsed under logical scrutiny, but instead generated productive tension. These competing editions create what we might call the Akashic hoax, multiple fake versions of a non-existent book competing for real fake status. Each editor claims special access to hidden knowledge. Each translation promises to reveal the true text behind Lovecraft's fictional references. The result is a marketplace of impossibility, where consumers choose between different versions of the same non-existent book, comparing translations of an original that never existed, debating authenticity of deliberately inauthentic texts. Publishers compete not on historical accuracy, but on imaginative authority. The ability to make fiction feel more fictional than fiction, more authentic than authenticity. Different masks for the same face, different faces for the same mask. Commercial success reveals something critical about contemporary spiritual seeking that traditional religious institutions have been slow to recognize. Modern practitioners are less concerned with historical authenticity than practical effectiveness. They don't need the Necronomicon to be genuinely ancient, dug from desert sands or unearthed from forgotten crypts. They need it genuinely useful. Various editions compete not on scholarly accuracy, but on their ability to provide meaningful experiences, altered consciousness, expanded awareness, contact with forces that feel larger than ordinary human understanding. The marketplace becomes laboratory, where different approaches to impossible knowledge are tested, refined, evolved through consumer selection. Experience becomes the product that matters, and shoppers arrive with questions about provenance, but leave with transformations. The proliferation of fake Necronomicons demonstrates impossible books' infectious nature in commercial form. Each new edition doesn't diminish others, it strengthens them. Every additional version adds to the cumulative cultural presence of the Necronomicon concept, increasing its visibility and legitimacy in the marketplace of ideas. Like viral variants, each edition carries core genetic material while adapting to new environmental conditions. Different audiences, changed spiritual needs, evolved cultural contexts. The book achieves what economists call network effects, becoming more valuable as more people use it, more real as more versions exist. Commerce becomes a form of collective belief. Purchasing becomes a form of voting, and the cash register becomes altar where fictional books achieve reality through the ancient magic of supply meeting demand. Digital environments have proven particularly hospitable to this commercial and mimetic proliferation. Online, authentic and inauthentic distinctions blur like watercolors in rain. Well-designed websites make any text appear historically legitimate, complete with scholarly apparatus, bibliographic citations, and testimonials from satisfied practitioners. Search engines rank based on popularity rather than scholarly authority, creating feedback loops where frequently accessed information appears more credible, which increases access, which enhances credibility. The Necronomicon has achieved statistical authenticity, becoming real through sheer volume of associated information rather than historical verification. Amazon reviews treat different editions with the seriousness of biblical scholarship, comparing translations, debating interpretations, sharing personal experiences with ritual practices. 5-star ratings accumulate like scholarly citations, each positive review adding another layer of legitimacy. Digital piracy accelerates the process. PDF versions circulate through file-sharing networks, torrents, and occult forums, each download representing another infection vector. Unlike physical books constrained by printing costs and distribution networks, digital texts spread without economic friction. Social media provides new platforms. Instagram posts daily sigils, Twitter shares cryptic passages, YouTube offers guided readings. The book fragments across media, becoming less singular text than distributed phenomenon. You feel it now, don't you? The slight shift in attention as you consider which edition you might encounter, which version might call to you from digital shelves or physical bookstores. This is how the contagion spreads through commerce, not through dramatic revelation, but through the simple act of browsing, comparing, choosing. Every click on a product page, every reading of customer reviews, every moment spent wondering about authenticity contributes to the book's ongoing reality. The screen glows with promise of secrets, and you become another node in its vast network, another voice whispering its name. The marketplace doesn't simply distribute these texts. It validates them, legitimizes them, makes them real through the simple expedient of treating them as commodities worth buying, selling, reviewing, and recommending. By the time you close the browser tab or leave the bookstore, the sigil on whatever cover you've contemplated has already learned your outline. That is how the book moves now, not as crate on ship, but as pattern across eyes and hands, as choreography of purchases and posts. Commerce becomes scripture, and the impossible book achieves reality through the most mundane of miracles, the transaction that transforms curiosity into possession, browser into believer, audience into cast member in an ongoing performance where the curtain never truly falls. Examines the commercial proliferation of fake Necronomicon editions from the 1970s onward, showing how these real fake books exploit contemporary spiritual seeking that prioritizes effectiveness over authenticity. It introduces the concept of the Akashic hoax, multiple competing versions of the same non-existent book, and demonstrates how digital environments enable statistical authenticity through volume of references rather than scholarly verification. The chapter reveals how commercial success strengthens rather than weakens the Necronomicon concept, with each new edition adding to its cumulative cultural presence and legitimacy in the spiritual marketplace. In 1991, the first complete Necronomicon text appeared on early internet bulletin boards, uploaded by an anonymous user claiming to have transcribed it from a rare manuscript. Within hours, hundreds of downloads. Within days, dozens of systems. Within months, multiple versions across the emerging digital landscape. This marked crucial evolution in impossible books' lives. The modem's screech became the new wind through ruined cities, green phosphor text glowing against black screens like ancient sigils carved in electronic amber. The stage had expanded beyond physical boundaries, its curtain now woven from fiber optic cables, and the audience, once confined to hushed library corners and clandestine bookshop meetings, became a global network, whispering in the digital dark. Digital environments didn't just provide new medium, they transformed fundamental nature. For the first time, forbidden texts could spread without physical constraints, replicate without degradation, mutate without detection. The Internet proved perfect ecosystem for textual impossibility, an environment where information wants to be free and fiction wants to be real. Unlike physical books requiring printing presses, distribution networks, and shelf space, digital texts exist as pure information, copied infinitely without cost, modified instantly without permission, distributed globally at light speed. The book shed its skin of vellum and binding, becoming weightless but not powerless, invisible but increasingly intimate. The Necronomicon's digital proliferation followed viral patterns that epidemiologists would recognize. Original uploads copied and reposted across bulletin board systems, users creating versions by adding passages they claimed to remember from other sources, removing sections they deemed corrupted, inserting commentary that gradually became indistinguishable from original text. Some claimed to restore missing portions based on dreams or visions. Others insisted they possessed more complete manuscripts from private collections. Each iteration spawned further iterations in accelerating cycles of reproduction and mutation. The book began evolving in real time, shaped by collective community input, like a story told around a digital campfire where every participant adds details that become canonical truth. This collaborative evolution represents something unprecedented in textual history. Traditional books maintain relatively stable identities across editions. Scholars can trace changes, identify variants, establish authoritative versions. But digital impossible books exist in permanent flux, constantly revised, updated, reimagined by users who become unwitting co-authors in ongoing creative process. They become crowd-sourced mythology, stories writing themselves through collective audience input, narratives that grow and change through accumulated attention of their readers. The boundary between author and audience dissolves, replaced by collaborative networks where everyone becomes both consumer and creator of impossible knowledge. Wiki phenomena have taken this collaborative approach to logical extremes that would make Borges proud. The Cthulhu Mythos Wiki contains thousands of pages detailing history of fictional entities, complete contents of impossible books, detailed biographies of imaginary authors. Contributors treat fictional information with scholarly rigor rivaling academic research, sourcing page numbers that point to other fictional texts, cross-referencing events that never occurred, building elaborate, internally consistent narratives transcending individual authorship. Every edit becomes small act of world-building, every addition another layer in accumulated sediment of shared imagination. The wiki becomes less encyclopedia than collaborative novel, less reference work than ongoing ritual performance where participants create reality through documenting it. Smartphone apps claiming to contain Necronomicon portions can be downloaded from major app stores, their existence as mundane as weather applications. These transform forbidden texts from something you read in private moments into something you carry constantly, from books you consult occasionally into tools you use daily. Applications include daily incantations, delivered as push notifications, entity summoning guides with GPS integration for optimal ritual locations, protective ward generators creating sigils based on user input and lunar phases. The impossible book becomes ambient presence, whispering through notification sounds, glowing through lock screens, integrating with calendar apps to suggest optimal times for cosmic contact. Social media has further accelerated evolution into forms unrecognizable to earlier generations of forbidden book seekers. Twitter accounts claiming to represent Lovecraftian entities post cryptic messages followers interpret as forbidden knowledge fragments, building narratives through micro-interactions and hashtag conversations. Instagram shares daily sigils and ritual photography. TikTok offers 15-second invocations performed with casual intimacy of makeup tutorials. Each platform develops its own conventions for presenting impossible knowledge, its own aesthetic vocabulary for the forbidden, its own community norms around authenticity and effectiveness. The result is textual ecosystem where impossible books exist not as discrete objects but as distributed phenomena, fragments scattered across platforms and devices, reassembling in different configurations for different users. The book you encounter on your phone differs from the version your friend finds on their laptop, which varies from the edition discovered through social media recommendations. Yet all remain recognizably the same impossible book, carrying essential genetic code while adapting to new technological environments. You check your phone and notice a notification from an app you don't remember downloading. The screen shows a sigil that seems familiar, though you can't place where you've seen it before. This is how the book travels now, not as weight in your bag, but as pattern in your pocket, not as dust on shelves, but as data in clouds, not as secret knowledge hoarded by initiates, but as shared experience distributed across networks of attention. The digital age has democratized the impossible, making forbidden books available to anyone with internet access, while simultaneously making them more mysterious, more mutable, more alive than they ever were in their purely fictional origins. By the time you close the app, the spell persists in cached memory and the algorithm has already learned your preferences, preparing tomorrow's recommendations with the patience of a librarian who never sleeps. Explores how digital technology transformed impossible books from static objects into dynamic processes. It shows how the internet enabled viral spread and collaborative evolution, creating crowdsourced mythology through wiki projects and user contributions. The chapter demonstrates how mobile technology and social media created new forms of textual intimacy, with forbidden books becoming portable tools rather than distant objects. It reveals how digital platforms have democratized textual authority, allowing any version to claim authenticity and any interpretation to find audiences, fundamentally altering the nature of impossible books in the information age. The Necronomicon does not stand alone in its impossible library. It conducts an orchestra of forbidden texts, each carrying distinct timbres that harmonize into the Mythos's complete chord. On the scarred oak table, beside the water glass and green-shaded lamp, we arrange them, a catalog of impossibility that reveals the collaborative nature of fictional reality. The stage expands to accommodate multiple volumes, each book a different instrument in an ensemble that plays compositions no single author could have imagined, their spines gleaming under green light like a keyboard of bone and leather waiting for fingers that understand the music they contain. The Book of Ibon, from Clark Ashton Smith Cycles, carries melancholy frost that settles on consciousness like morning dew on ancient tombstones. Its pages breathe blue light on snow, revealing lost epics and sorceries that feel like echoes in old stone, memories of civilizations that fell before humanity learned to count years. Where the Necronomicon threatens with cosmic indifference, Ibon mourns with elegiac beauty, transforming horror into nostalgia for times that never were. Reading it is like breathing incense in a cathedral where the prayers have long since gone cold, where stained glass windows filter light that no longer carries hope, only the aesthetic residue of abandoned faith. Ibon is the mechanism for longing. It makes you homesick for Hyperborea's crystal spires, for Atlantean libraries where sorcerer kings catalog the names of dying stars. De Vermis Mysterious, from Robert Bloch's corner, is earthy and malodorous in ways that make skin crawl without supernatural intervention. Its rituals are oily, leaving residues that stain fingers and consciousness alike, their byproducts seeping into the grain of wood like old blood into floorboards. It smells like cellars after you've dragged something heavy across brick, like basement workshops, where amateur practitioners learn arts they found in books they shouldn't have discovered, where Ibon dreams of lost beauty, Prynne instructs in present grotesquerie, where the Necronomicon reveals cosmic architecture, De Vermis performs earthly transformations. This is the mechanism for praxis, the grimoire of the practical magician, the handbook for those who want results regardless of cost, who measure success in changed flesh rather than expanded consciousness. Unaussprechlichen Kulten by Friedrich von Junst reads like field reports from wrong fields, dispatches from expeditions that should have turned back at the first warning sign. Blunt, brutal, Germanic in cadence, its sentences fall like boots on wet boards, each statement a nail hammered into the coffin of comfortable assumptions. It names masks without metaphors, speaks truths without poetry, cataloging horrors with the methodical precision of a coroner documenting atrocities. Von Junst's voice carries no romance, no mystical allure, only the flat effect of someone who has seen too much and reports what he's witnessed with the emotional range of a field naturalist studying venomous insects. This is the mechanism for naming, clinical dissection of cosmic horror, removing mystery's veil to expose the stark, unfeeling machinery beneath. This pantheon reveals how the mythos builds not just entities but textual functions, each book serving as specialized organ in a larger organism of impossible knowledge. Together they orchestrate audience mood like theater lighting, shifting stage illumination from Ibon's melancholy blue to Prynne's sickly amber to von Junst's iron gray. The Necronomicon becomes conductor of this textual orchestra, the rumored gur text into which all other volumes pour their specialized knowledge and from which they derive their authority. Notice the sensory division of labor. Ibon is blue light on frost, Prynne is oil in wood grain, von Junst is iron on wetboards. The theater needs these timbrels. A single instrument can lull you, an ensemble can move you. Cross-pollination serves the hyperstition by creating what we might call bibliographic ecology, a self-sustaining system where fictional books reference each other, creating networks of mutual validation. Authors borrowed each other's props with generous enthusiasm, training readers to accept shared stages, common references, overlapping mythologies. When Smith borrows Lovecraft's book and Lovecraft nods toward Chambers' play, when Bloch slides Prynne across Arkham's counter and Derleth inventories everything with tidy editorial precision, they aren't diluting anything. They're teaching you how to move between curtains without tripping on the hem. A library entered from many doors is harder to deny than one approached through single entrance. The yellow sign glows in the corner like a prop borrowed from another play. Reminder that the impossible library extends beyond Lovecraft's immediate circle. Robert W. Chambers' King in Yellow preceded Lovecraft by decades, establishing the template. Texts structurally dangerous, banned not for blasphemy, but for completing circuits between reader and reality that won't open again. The King in Yellow introduced books that harm through being read, stories that change readers in ways that cannot be undone. When the yellow sign and Necronomicon share a table, mimetic synergy flickers like footlights. One suggests that art itself can be the ritual, the other supplies the cosmology that art reveals. The orchestra grows larger still. Culte des Ghouls arrives like a candle guttering in a crypt, its French cadences slick with aristocratic decay. The Pnakotic manuscripts rustle like dry leaves under winter stars, purporting to remember what humanity has not yet learned to forget. The Eltdown shards crunch in the hand like chalk and bone, a geology of meaning more eroded than deciphered. Modern editions continue the tradition. Digital grimoires appear online with production values rivaling professional publications, complete with scholarly apparatus, ritual instructions, user reviews treating fictional information with academic rigor. Together, these volumes create what we might call a meta-grimoire, a sprawling, evolving work that transcends any single author or text. They form the accumulated weight of humanity's deepest fears about knowledge, about the cost of seeing too much, about doors that reveal not just another room but voids that stare back. The collective reality they achieve through collaborative impossibility is stronger than any individual fiction could sustain. You notice how naturally you've begun thinking of these books as collection rather than isolated fictions, how easily you imagine browsing their spines on some midnight shelf. The waterline rises between the volumes, mist gathering in the spaces where one impossible text references another. You can hear it in the brackish slosh by Arkham's Bridge, taste it in the air like copper pennies and old parchment. The library is a harbor. The harbor is a mouth. The mouth whispers vowels you recognize from dreams you thought you'd forgotten. By the time you finish cataloging the collection, you realize you've been thinking like a librarian rather than a skeptic, organizing rather than questioning, shelving rather than dismissing. The impossible library has found another curator, and the books continue their patient work of making themselves real through being read, referenced, and remembered. Expands focus to other forbidden texts within the Lovecraft circle and beyond, showing how each serves different functions within a larger textual ecosystem. It demonstrates how the Book of Eibon, De Vermis Mysterius, and Unaussprechlichen Kulten each provide distinct mechanisms, longing, praxis, naming, that support the Necronomicon's central role. The chapter reveals how cross-author borrowing and editorial codification created a shared library that readers can enter from multiple points, strengthening the mythos reality through collaborative world building. It introduces the King in Yellow as a precursor that established the template for structurally dangerous texts, showing how cross-contamination between different fictional universes creates mimetic synergy. Carl Jung never wrote about the Necronomicon, but he might have recognized it as a perfect example of an autonomous complex, a cluster of psychic energy taking on life within the collective unconscious, manifesting with the independence of a separate personality that breathes with its own rhythm in the green lamp's circle. The book exists not as paper and ink, but as living symbol, archetypal form manifesting wherever consciousness encounters boundaries, between known and unknown, safe and dangerous, rational and cosmic. In the theater of the mind, it arrives unbidden, like fog, rolling across still water, a player that enters the stage without invitation, yet commands attention with the authority of something that has always been waiting in the wings. This psychological perspective offers fundamentally different understanding of impossible books, shifting the question from material existence to symbolic function. Rather than asking whether they exist literally, a question that leads to dead ends and circular arguments, we ask what psychological needs they fulfill, what archetypal patterns they embody, what aspects of consciousness they represent and activate. The Necronomicon becomes less book than symbol, and symbols, as Jung understood, have reality transcending the material world. They operate in the realm of meaning rather than matter, influence rather than substance, transformation rather than information. The book's power lies not in its pages, but in its capacity to constellate psychological energies around fundamental human concerns about knowledge, power, and the price of seeing too much. The archetypal pattern embodied by forbidden texts is ancient and universal, appearing across cultures with remarkable consistency like stars forming the same constellations despite vast distances. Every civilization has stories of dangerous knowledge. The biblical tree of knowledge that brought exile from Eden, Pandora's box releasing evils into the world, the Islamic concept of bid'ah warning against innovations that corrupt faith, the Jewish mystical teaching of Pardes where 4 rabbis entered paradise, but only one returned unharmed. All represent the same fundamental archetype, knowledge that transforms the knower in ways that cannot be undone, wisdom that comes at costs exceeding its benefits, illumination that blinds as much as it reveals. The serpent whispers, the box beckons, the forbidden phrase hums in the mind, and the idea acts on you with the patient persistence of water-wearing stone. The Necronomicon carries specific psychological charge as archetypal forbidden text of the modern era, reflecting contemporary anxieties about humanity's place in an expanding, impersonal universe. It represents not religious transgression, the violation of divine commandments within meaningful cosmic order, but cosmic transgression, violation of reality's fundamental structure, breach of boundaries that separate human consciousness from inhuman vastness. The knowledge it supposedly contains is dangerous, not because it offends God, but because it reveals God's absence, the universe's indifference, human existence's meaninglessness when viewed from cosmic perspective. This is forbidden knowledge for the age of astronomy and physics, when telescopes reveal galaxies that dwarf human significance and microscopes expose biological mechanisms operating without purpose or compassion. This makes it particularly modern forbidden text, adapted to contemporary forms of existential dread that traditional grimoires cannot address. Traditional grimoires offer dangerous knowledge within fundamentally meaningful universes, worlds where angels and demons battled for souls, where human actions mattered to cosmic powers, where suffering and joy had ultimate significance. But the Necronomicon offers dangerous knowledge within fundamentally meaningless universes, revealing cosmic entities that regard humanity with the interest we show bacteria, forces operating by alien logics, making no accommodation for human values, scales of time and space that render individual existence statistically negligible. The psychological appeal of cosmic nihilism is complex and paradoxical, offering both terror and strange liberation, like a medicine that poisons and cures simultaneously. It provides relief from meaning's burden. If the universe is truly indifferent, then personal suffering isn't divine punishment. Professional failure isn't moral failing. Human limitation isn't cosmic inadequacy. The weight of ultimate responsibility dissolves in the acid of cosmic perspective. But cosmic nihilism also offers its own peculiar meaning, the meaning of meaninglessness, the significance of insignificance. To possess cosmic knowledge becomes form of transcendence through transgression, elevation through degradation, enlightenment through disillusionment. The initiate achieves superiority over ordinary consciousness by accepting humanity's cosmic inferiority, wearing the mask of ultimate knowledge while the face beneath learns to breathe in thinner air. Online communities forming around impossible books demonstrate this collective psychological function in measurable ways, serving as laboratories for what psychologists call controlled transgression, safe violation of normal cognitive boundaries that allows exploration of dangerous ideas without permanent psychological damage. Members don't necessarily believe Cthulhu literally exists in Pacific depths, but they share intuitive sense that reality is stranger and more dangerous than conventional consciousness admits. These communities provide what we might call benign masochism, controlled exposure to disturbing ideas that ultimately strengthens rather than damages psychological resilience. They develop elaborate mythologies, ritual practices, philosophical discussions that expand the book's psychological reality, while maintaining safety protocols, content warnings as liturgy, debrief threads as aftercare, grounding exercises as apotropaic signs. Yet archetypes cast shadows, And the Necronomicon's shadow includes grandiosity masquerading as humility, detachment curdling into avoidance, fascination sliding toward compulsion. The promise of cosmic indifference can excuse unkindness. The romance of insignificance can dull responsibility. The best communities mitigate these risks by insisting on practical anchors. Drink water, touch wood, text a friend, reintroducing human scale without shrinking wonder, teaching exit as well as entrance. You feel it now, don't you? The slight shift in perspective as these psychological interpretations settle into consciousness, like sediment in still water. This is how depth psychology operates, not by explaining away mysterious phenomena, but by revealing their deeper significance, their role in the ongoing drama of consciousness encountering itself in ever stranger forms. The moment you began considering the book's psychological function rather than its material existence, you participated in the very process Jung described, the autonomous complex drawing psychic energy into its orbit, the symbol acting upon the psyche through sustained attention. The green lamp's circle of light becomes a mandala, the water glass a scrying mirror, and you realize you've been gazing into depths that reflect not external reality, but internal landscapes where impossible books serve as maps to territories of consciousness that conventional psychology hasn't yet learned to navigate. Explores impossible books from Jungian psychological perspective, presenting them as archetypal symbols embodying universal human ambivalence about dangerous knowledge. It shows how the Necronomicon represents specifically modern cosmic nihilism rather than traditional religious transgression, offering transcendence through meaninglessness. The chapter explains how these books serve both individual psychological needs, relief from existential burden, and collective cultural functions, safe exploration of disturbing themes. It demonstrates how online communities around impossible books serve as laboratories for exploring psychological effects of engaging with forbidden knowledge, providing spaces where contemporary anxieties about cosmic insignificance can be safely processed. We have traveled far from simple questions of existence. The journey has revealed something more profound. The book does exist, but not in ways initially understood. It exists as process rather than product, relationship rather than object, ongoing creation rather than completed artifact. In its strange existence, it reveals truths about reality's nature more unsettling than any cosmic horror Lovecraft imagined. The stage we thought we were observing has become the stage we're performing on, and the green lamp's circle of light now illuminates not just pages, but the faces of unwitting actors in a play that writes itself through being performed. The Necronomicon's metamorphosis from fictional reference to cultural institution demonstrates what sociologists call social construction of reality, the process by which shared beliefs and practices create phenomena they purport to describe. But this case goes beyond typical social construction in ways that challenge fundamental assumptions about existence itself. The book doesn't just exist because people believe in it. It exists because people interact with it, modify it, distribute it, build communities around it. It achieves reality through activity rather than belief, practice rather than faith, engagement rather than passive acceptance. The difference is crucial. Belief can remain private, but engagement transforms both the engager and the engaged. This represents what we might call performative reality, a new existence form that operates by different rules than traditional objects. The Necronomicon is real like money is real, not because it corresponds to pre-existing objects, but because enough people treat it as real that it functions as if real. Like money, its reality is maintained through collective agreement and continuous performance, each transaction adding weight to its accumulated authority. But unlike money, which derives reality from institutional backing, governments, banks, legal frameworks, the Necronomicon derives reality from something deeper and more mysterious, collective human fascination with forbidden knowledge itself. It exists because we need it to exist, because consciousness requires objects embodying its deepest fears and desires about knowledge's nature. The book serves as focal point for energies that would otherwise remain diffuse. Our terror of meaninglessness, our fascination with the forbidden, our longing for transcendence through transgression. You can smell the chalk dust settling on windowsills, taste the metallic tang of anticipation, feel the water glass sweating beside the lamp as these realizations settle into consciousness, like sediment in still water. This functional approach to reality represents fundamental shift in understanding existence itself. Traditional metaphysics asks, what exists, then inquires into properties and effects. Assuming existence precedes function, being precedes meaning. But Impossible books suggest we might need to reverse this philosophical priority, asking what effects we observe, what functions are being served, then working backward to determine what existence forms might account for those effects. This is not relativism, but pragmatism, recognizing that reality includes not just material objects, but patterns, relationships, processes that shape experience in measurable ways. The Necronomicon clearly exists from this functional perspective. It has measurable effects that can be cataloged like any cultural phenomenon. Books published, communities formed, practices developed, experiences reported, consciousness transformed. These effects are as real as those produced by any real book, as documentable as the influence of any historical text. The question isn't whether the book exists in some absolute sense, but what kind of existence it has and how that existence is maintained across time and cultural contexts. The study reveals something profound about cultural evolution operating through variation, selection, and transmission in ways that mirror but transcend biological evolution. Various Necronomicon versions represent variation, different adaptations to different cultural niches, different solutions to the same underlying psychological needs. The success of certain versions represents selection. Some variants prove more effective at fulfilling their functions than others. The spread through digital networks, academic conferences, commercial markets represents transmission, mechanisms by which successful cultural variants propagate across populations. But unlike biological evolution, cultural evolution operates at vastly accelerated speeds and can involve conscious direction from participants who understand and actively guide the evolutionary process. We are not passive observers of this cultural evolution, but active participants, co-creators in an ongoing experiment in reality formation that challenges traditional distinctions between fiction and fact, imagination and existence, individual and collective consciousness. Every engagement with the concept, every discussion, every analysis, every moment of curiosity or skepticism contributes to the book's ongoing reality. We cannot study it without changing it, cannot observe it without participating in its existence, cannot understand it without becoming part of the phenomenon we seek to comprehend. The implications extend beyond literary studies into fundamental questions about consciousness and reality. If fictional constructs can achieve functional reality through sustained collective attention, what does this suggest about the participatory nature of reality itself? If impossible books can influence behavior, inspire communities, generate experiences, and transform consciousness, what other aspects of reality might be more malleable, more dependent on consciousness, more collaborative than we typically assume? You feel it now, don't you? The slight shift in perspective as these recognitions settle into awareness like fog rolling across still water. This is how the deepest transformations occur, not through dramatic revelation, but through quiet recognition of what was always already happening. The moment you began engaging seriously with the book's concept, you became part of the very phenomenon you sought to understand. The idea acts on you as you act upon it. And in that reciprocal choreography, new forms of reality flicker into existence like stars forming in distant nebulae. The water glass beside the lamp reflects green light like a scrying mirror, and in its depths you glimpse not predictions of the future but recognitions of the present. You're no longer reading about impossible books but participating in their ongoing creation, no longer analyzing cultural phenomena but helping to generate them through the very act of sustained attention. The book reads you as you read about it, and the curtain between observer and observed dissolves like mist, revealing a stage where consciousness encounters itself in ever stranger forms, ever more impossible possibilities, ever deeper collaborations with the void that watches back, synthesizes the journey's discoveries, revealing how the Necronomicon exists as performative reality, maintained through collective activity rather than belief. It introduces concepts of functional existence, where things exist to the degree they serve important functions, and demonstrates how impossible books reveal the participatory nature of reality creation. The chapter shows how cultural evolution operates through conscious participation, with creators and users actively guiding the development of their cultural creations. It reveals the implications extending beyond literary curiosities to suggest that consciousness participates in reality's ongoing creation through attention, imagination, and collective engagement with shared fictions. You have been reading about impossible books for some time now. You have learned about origins, transmission, effects on readers and communities. You have discovered how they achieve reality through collective attention, evolve through digital networks, serve psychological functions transcending fictional status. But throughout this exploration, you have maintained comfortable distance from the phenomenon you are studying, approaching it with scholarly detachment, like observing a strange artifact behind museum glass, the green lamp casting light on pages that seemed safely separate from your own hands, the water glass reflecting depths you hadn't yet recognized as your own. It is time to abandon that distance. You are not outside this phenomenon, but inside it, not studying the text, but being studied by it, not reading the book, but being read by the book. The moment you began engaging seriously with impossible books concept, you became part of the very phenomenon you sought to understand. Your breath joined the chorus that sustains their reality. Your shadow took its place among the audience that watches the audience. The stage you thought you were observing has become the stage you're performing on, and the curtain between observer and observed has dissolved like morning mist, leaving you standing in light that reveals more than you expected to see. This is forbidden knowledge's deepest secret. It implicates its seekers in its own creation. Every question you ask about the Necronomicon contributes to its ongoing reality through the simple act of sustained attention. Every doubt you express about its existence paradoxically confirms its presence in your consciousness, because to doubt something is to acknowledge its conceptual existence, to grant it residence in the mental space where you housed your most intimate thoughts. Every attempt to understand how fictional books become real participates in the very process that makes fictional books real, adding your voice to the collective chorus that sustains their impossible existence through engagement, analysis, and the willingness to take them seriously as cultural phenomena. The mechanism operates through what we might call cognitive contamination, ideas that establish residence in consciousness regardless of belief or agreement. Like viral particles that hijack cellular machinery to reproduce themselves, these concepts use your attention as substrate for their own propagation. You don't need to believe in the Necronomicon for it to affect how you think about fiction and reality. You only need to think about it seriously, to engage with its implications, to let it occupy space in your mental architecture where it can slowly reshape your understanding of what constitutes existence. The contagion spreads through exposure rather than conversion, through contact rather than faith. Consider what has happened during this exploration. You began with simple questions about certain books' existence, perhaps casual curiosity sparked by a title, expecting to learn interesting facts about literary phenomena without fundamental alteration to your worldview. But in pursuing those questions, you have been exposed to ideas changing how you think about fiction and reality relationships, imagination and knowledge, possibility and actuality. You have learned concepts, textual contagion, performative reality, cultural attractors, hyperstition, that will continue influencing how you understand the world long after these words fade. These concepts are not merely academic constructs, but lenses that, once worn, permanently alter the landscape of perception. You can no longer unsee the patterns, unhear the whispers of the impossible in the mundane. You have also been exposed to particular ways of thinking about consciousness and its relationship to reality that challenge fundamental assumptions about existence itself. You have encountered the idea that consciousness is not simply passive receiver of pre-existing information, but active participant in reality's ongoing creation, co-author in the unfolding story of what becomes real through sustained attention. You have been introduced to the possibility that sustained attention to fictional constructs can give them functional existence, that imagination is not escape from reality, but one of the primary mechanisms through which reality is continuously generated and maintained. These ideas are themselves forbidden knowledge in the most profound sense. They challenge conventional assumptions about existence's nature, mind, and world relationships, real and imaginary distinctions that most people never question because questioning them leads to vertigo. They suggest reality is more malleable, more participatory, more dependent on consciousness than comfortable materialism allows. This is the true horror, not of monsters, but of structural redefinition, the unsettling recognition that the very foundations of understanding are less solid than believed, that the solid world of objects and facts might be more like collaborative fiction maintained through collective agreement than independent structure existing regardless of human awareness. The transmission of these ideas through your reading represents a form of initiation that operates below the threshold of conscious decision. You have been inducted into particular ways of seeing the world, particular understandings of consciousness and reality relationships, particular vocabularies for describing phenomena that conventional discourse cannot adequately address. The exposure itself has effects transcending belief or agreement. Like radiation exposure, the transformation occurs regardless of whether you accept its reality. You have been given conceptual tools that will continue working in your consciousness, shaping perception, influencing interpretation of experience in ways both subtle and profound. You feel it now, don't you? The slight shift in the quality of your attention, the sense that something has changed in your relationship to the ideas you've been considering. The green lamp's light now illuminates not just imagined pages, but your own hands, your own face, revealing you as part of the scene. The chalk dust that settled on windowsills in imagined libraries now clings to your breath, fine particulate of impossible knowledge inhaled with every word. The water beside the lamp reflects not just light, but the face that peers into its depths. Your face, changed subtly by engagement with concepts that resist easy categorization. This is not loss, but liberation. You have been freed from the prison of naive realism, given permission to participate consciously in reality's ongoing creation rather than merely consuming prepackaged versions of what exists. The forbidden knowledge has made you complicit in the phenomena it describes. But complicity here means collaboration, partnership in the endless dance between consciousness and possibility that generates the world we inhabit. You are no longer simply reading about impossible books. You are helping to write them through your engagement, contributing to their ongoing reality. Through attention, imagination, and the willingness to hold space for what exists between certainty and doubt, completes the self-implication twist by directly addressing the reader as unwitting participant in the phenomenon they've been studying. It reveals how engaging with impossible books' concepts constitutes initiation that transforms the reader's relationship to reality. The chapter explains how forbidden knowledge operates through contamination rather than conversion, establishing residence in consciousness regardless of belief. It shows how readers become characters in the extended text of impossible books, contributing to their ongoing creation through attempts to understand them. The chapter explores the irreversible nature of forbidden knowledge and reframes this transformation as potentially liberating, offering conscious participation in reality creation. We return to quiet darkness where our journey began, but you return changed. The secrets of the Necronomicon, of forbidden texts and cosmic truths, are not meant for easy answers or comforting resolutions. They lead instead to deeper, more profound silence, echoing void that speaks not of closure, but of boundless, indifferent being. The green lamp circle has expanded beyond pages to encompass the face that reads, the hands that hold understanding, the breath that sustains attention in spaces between words. The stage has grown intimate, its audience reduced to one, its performance more subtle than when we first drew aside the curtain. The circular echo of our opening motif, knowledge's cost, now resonates with terrible, earned clarity that settles in consciousness like sediment in still water. You sought knowledge and found it not as fact collection, but as transformative experience, quiet dismantling of the world you thought you inhabited. The whisper, not the scream, is the final note, resolving an existential thesis that cannot be unlearned. The universe is vast, uncaring, utterly indifferent to your existence. This is not malice, but something far more unsettling. The absence of malice, the void where intention should be, cold emptiness that simply is. The creation inversion twist stands fully revealed like a photograph developing in chemical baths. Beginnings are not light and order, but veils and voids, chaos and indifference wearing masks of meaning until you look closely enough to see the emptiness beneath. The Necronomicon reveals not creation secrets, but uncreation secrets, primordial chaos underpinning all seeming order like water beneath ice. The ultimate horror is not malicious intent, which would at least acknowledge human significance, but intent's utter absence, vast blankness that breathes without purpose, moves without design. In Jorge Luis Borges' Library of Babel, he imagines a universe consisting entirely of infinite library containing every possible book. The Necronomicon and its siblings exist in literary limbo between books written and books that could be written but haven't been, occupying strange space where possible and impossible intersect, where fiction and reality converge like parallel lines meeting at infinity. They are Babel's most dangerous volumes, texts that read their readers, books that write themselves through being imagined. But our exploration reveals what Borges perhaps didn't anticipate. The infinite library is not static collection gathering dust in hexagonal chambers, but dynamic system constantly growing through readers' participation. Every engagement with impossible books adds new volumes. Every interpretation, adaptation, discussion contributes new texts to infinite archive that expands faster than any cataloger could index. The library writes itself through being read, dreams itself through being imagined, achieves reality through accumulated weight of attention paid to its impossible contents. This transforms fundamental understanding of relationships between readers and texts, consciousness and reality, possible and actual. We are not simply visitors to infinite library, but active contributors to its ongoing expansion. Through attention, imagination, engagement, we participate in continuous creation of new realities, new possibilities, new existence forms that blur boundaries between what is and what could be. The impossible books have taught their deepest lesson. Existence is not property things possess or lack, but process unfolding through interaction, relationship, sustained attention across time. They exist to the degree they are engaged with, matter to the extent they are cared about, achieve reality through being treated as real by consciousness, willing to hold space for what exists between certainty and impossibility. This is not relativism, but recognition, acknowledgement that reality includes not just material objects, but patterns, relationships, processes that shape experience in measurable ways. As you close this exploration and return to daily life, impossible books continue their work within you, like seeds planted in consciousness. The ideas encountered, perspectives gained, questions invited to consider, all remain active, slowly transforming your relationship to reality. The textual contagion has taken hold through simple act of sustained engagement. Forbidden knowledge transmitted not through conversion, but through exposure, transformation begun through willingness to take seriously what others dismiss as mere fiction. You will notice it in small ways. Different quality of attention when encountering books, heightened awareness of how stories shape reality, recognition that fiction and fact exist on spectrum rather than in separate categories. The chalk dust of impossible libraries will cling to your thoughts, and scent of old paper and green lamplight will follow you into ordinary bookstores where you browse with eyes that have learned to see differently. The silence speaks in frequencies below hearing, above understanding. The impossible exists in spaces between certainty and doubt, real and imaginary, written and unwritten. The book writes itself through your reading, and you write yourself through engaging with the impossible, participating in endless collaboration between consciousness and possibility that generates the world we inhabit. There is no end to this process, only endless beginning of consciousness, encountering itself in ever new forms, ever stranger configurations, ever more impossible possibilities. The water glass beside the lamp reflects depths you didn't notice before, and in those depths, something moves that might be shadow, might be light, might be reflection of your own face learning to read what reads it back. The curtain falls softly, but the stage remains, and the performance continues in theater of consciousness, where impossible books conduct their patient orchestra, playing compositions that write themselves through being heard, melodies that exist only in listening, harmonies that resolve not in endings, but in endless, echoing silence. The final chapter brings the narrative full circle, returning to opening motifs now imbued with profound clarity. It resolves at the existential thesis of cosmic indifference, delivered through whisper rather than scream. Using Borges' Library of Babel as metaphor, it reveals the infinite library as dynamic system growing through reader participation. The chapter demonstrates how impossible books teach that existence is process rather than property, achieved through sustained engagement rather than inherent substance. It concludes by recognizing that the exploration transforms the reader's ongoing relationship with reality, with the textual contagion ensuring continued participation in the infinite library's endless expansion. The final paradox: the book exists precisely because it doesn't exist conventionally, achieving reality through the reader's participation in its impossibility.